Good afternoon. I'm Delegate Neil Parrott. I'm right here in front of the Maryland State House, and I want to talk to you a little bit about pro-life or the abortion issue. It's interesting that we look at just this year. We had Governor Ralph Northam from Virginia who made some very controversial statements. We don't really know exactly what he meant, but it seemed to say that in Virginia he supported laws that would allow abortion right up until birth, and in some cases, if the baby was born but they really wanted to have the abortion, they'd go ahead and allow the baby to die afterwards. I just don't think that's right. I don't think that's American. New York, they passed a very similar bill where it allows abortions all the way right up in their law to birth. Maryland, we already have that bill. We already had that law from the 80s. And so as a state delegate, I've tried to push back a little bit on that. I think there are some common sense things that we can do to change the way Maryland operates in the abortion industry. One is parental notification. Right now, kids can go and have abortions and their parents would not even know that it happens. They might not know why they're sick or why they're not feeling well or why they're upset because they went and had the abortion. The parents, they had no idea. So the parent or guardians, the bill simply says they need to be able to sign off and they need to say, yes, we know it's happening, and they can go ahead and have the abortion. There would be exceptions if there was not a clear guardian where judges could get involved, but for the vast majority of the cases, the guardians would have to sign off. That's just one thing. I've introduced that twice. I've co-sponsored it before. Another one is at 20 weeks, we know, scientists have determined that fetuses or babies in the womb, they can feel pain. So after 20 weeks, it really doesn't seem to make sense. We're talking like third trimester abortions to allow those abortions to move forward when we know that it's a really baby in there. They feel pain. They're moving away from the needle when it comes in to the womb. That we would not allow abortions after that point. And so I've introduced that bill. I've co-sponsored other people who've had that bill. I have a clear record here in Annapolis of standing for pro-life legislation and trying to move for common sense solutions. As we look at Roe v. Wade nationally, that took it out of the state's hands and said, the national government said abortion's legal anytime, anywhere. Now, since then, different states have pushed back and had some of the common sense laws that I just mentioned. But Roe v. Wade, it was a bill, it wasn't a bill. It was the U.S. Supreme Court, and we need to overturn Roe v. Wade. It just doesn't make sense that legislation would be coming from the Supreme Court. That's not where legislation is supposed to come from. It's supposed to come from the Congress, from the U.S. Senate. That's where we make our laws, not from judges that are unelected, they're unaccountable. It's kind of like a little oligarchy if they're making laws from that branch. And I'm very encouraged that the judges that President Trump have been appointing are strict constitutionalists. They're going to follow the Constitution. They're not trying to make law from the bench. And I think as they look at Roe v. Wade, that they would see that ruling just really doesn't make any sense. So that's Roe v. Wade. I want to talk a little bit about something that I can do in Congress. One thing I can do is try to work with other congressmen to defund Planned Parenthood. For me, on day one, that's going to be one of my top priorities. Planned Parenthood should not be getting even $1 of our tax money. Their services, 90% of their services goes towards abortion. They're the #1 abortion provider in the entire country. Why are we giving our taxpayer money to Planned Parenthood? It just doesn't make sense. Now listen, over $500 million is the amount of money that we're giving, our taxpayer money, to Planned Parenthood. This has got to stop, and I believe with the new Congress, we can help make that stop, and I certainly want to be part of the charge to say, no, we're not going to fund Planned Parenthood any longer. So as we look at this issue, not only, and unfortunately, a lot of Democrats who are elected, not all Democrats, just those who are elected, the ones that are in Congress and the U.S. Senate, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them want to see our money not only go to Planned Parenthood so they can continue their abortion practice in the United States, but they want our money also to go to NGOs. That's a non-governmental organization. They want them to go to NGOs overseas so that they can perform abortions in the United States all over the world. I don't think that makes sense. And Ronald Reagan didn't think that made sense. That's why he came up with the Mexico City policy. And in that policy, it simply says that NGOs, if they perform abortions and they're overseas, they cannot get taxpayer money. I totally support that policy. And unfortunately, what we've seen since Ronald Reagan put that into action, when a Democrat gets elected to office, like Bill Clinton, they say, no, now we're going to go ahead and fund these NGOs. They're going to violate the Mexico City policy. And when a Republican gets back in office, like George W. Bush, he says, no, we're going to go ahead and follow the Mexico City policy. It's a ping pong back and forth. Which party is in office determines whether we follow the Mexico City policy or not. I don't think that makes sense. I think we need to have a law. I think Congress, again, needs to act. They need to take their responsibility of actually making the laws, and I support a law that says the Mexico City policy will be the law of the United States. And then it won't just ping pong back and forth depending on who the president is. It'll be a law, and if we want to change the law, then Congress, again, will have to act to change the law. It'll be much more difficult than a simple executive order. So as we look at the big issue of abortion, it's a huge issue, and it affects us every day here in the United States. So many people are having to deal with this issue. I think it's time that we fight. I think it's time that we stand up and say, you know, the majority of Americans don't want to see our taxpayer money go towards abortions. They just don't want to see that. Planned Parenthood should not be getting our money. The Mexico City policy needs to be in law. And we need to make sure that we're working to help the unborn whenever we can, especially those, like I talked about, after 20 weeks when we know they can feel pain. If you believe in this issue as much as I do, I really need your help. I'm running against David Trone. He has spent $15 million in his last election, but I believe there's a window that we can win, but I cannot do it without your support. Would you just click right below? Would you click and donate today? Even just a little bit of amount would help so that we can win the battle and I can get in there and work for pro-life issues in Congress. We don't have to be supporting Planned Parenthood. We need to make the Mexico City policy law so it doesn't just go back and forth, and I need your help. Together, we can make good changes in DC. Thank you.